It's that time of year again. It's the time of the year where we discuss what's going to happen with Sergio Perez and who's going to get that Red Bull seat. It's a question that people have been asking since the beginning of time. Who is going to get that Red Bull seat? You've got Sergio Perez, who is in that seat but doing pretty terribly, currently in 8th in the World Championship. However, there's many other people who are trying to get into that seat. We used to have Daniel Ricciardo, but Sergio Perez saw off that threat. Now we have Liam Lawson, Yuki Tsunoda, and possibly many others. So let's talk about it. So let's kick off then with Sergio Perez. He is a man who, if we had 24 races around the streets of Baku, would become world champion. Unfortunately, we don't. I just want to kickstart by noticing the fact in 2021, Perez was half a second slower, 0.564 slower than Max Verstappen. In 2022, Sergio Perez was only 3.5 tenths off him on average in probably what is his best season ever in terms of pace to Max, and in 2023 it was 0.548, which was still better than in 2021, which is a surprise. However, in 2024, Sergio Perez is 6 tenths slower on average than Max Verstappen. That's almost 3 tenths slower than the previous couple of years. Plus, there's been more crashes this year. Sergio Perez binned it in the wall in Baku, but that was really the least of his problems. Yes, in that race, Perez out-qualified Max Verstappen and was actually faster than him all weekend, although that might be down to some of Max Verstappen's setup. However, as I mentioned, Sergio Perez has had many crashes this year, and that really affected his chances of staying with him next year. Monaco, Sergio Perez was involved in another lap 1 incident with Kevin Magnussen. He also crashed solo in Hungary qualifying, a track where Perez was actually pretty fast at all weekend long, and even beat the Mercedes of George Russell, which Max Verstappen couldn't even beat Lewis Hamilton in. Of course, there was a collision, so that has a lot to do with it. Sergio Perez crashed out in Silverstone qualifying too, another mistake where Perez clearly is trying too hard and he's not doing a good enough job in 1 lap pace, and that's been extremely evident considering he's had 2 qualifying crashes. He was out in Q1 in Canada too, but it was in the race which he crashed out. Sergio Perez has never been known as a rain master, but his deficit to Max Verstappen on high-speed circuits and in the rain is the most noticeable. Which is a surprise. Sergio Perez has managed to win in the wet before. In Monaco 2022, Perez bested Verstappen all weekend long, but 2022 seems to be the highlight for Sergio Perez. But why should Sergio Perez stay at Red Bull next year? Well, although he's quite off the pace of Verstappen, he is a consistent point scorer. He will bring home points if the car is, well, ultra fast. Perez will actually manage to score points, and he has scored points this year, but unfortunately he's too far behind in the Constructors' Championship to do anything about it, unfortunately. We now go on to Yuki Tsunoda. He is one of the most unfortunate people on the planet. While Sergio Perez is in a seat which he probably doesn't deserve, Yuki Tsunoda is in a seat that he also doesn't deserve. He deserves a much better seat than the one he's actually got. However, there's a few reasons why Yuki Tsunoda isn't in that seat. Now, I really like Yuki Tsunoda, and he definitely deserves to be in Red Bull next year. But I'm going to actually speak slightly negatively about Yuki Tsunoda, so I just want to say that in advance, is that every time Sergio Perez has, done really well, Yuki Tsunoda does, but when Perez does badly, Tsunoda generally also does badly, which I don't know how that's possible, but it is a general trend, and that's quite noticeable when he's teammates with Liam Lawson. Liam Lawson in their 2 stints together has actually probably been slightly better than Yuki Tsunoda. In their first race together at the Dutch Grand Prix in 2023, Lawson beat Tsunoda. And of course, I will talk about Liam Lawson after, but Tsunoda did have a penalty which cost him. He was also out of the Italian Grand Prix on the formation lap, had an unfortunate lap 1 contact with Sergio Perez in Singapore, and was outgunned by Liam Lawson in Suzuka. Tsunoda is a general really fast driver. We now go on to Liam Lawson. So I didn't really speak too much about how well Yuki Tsunoda has been doing. He's done very well this year. However, they are mistakes, and when they are the mistakes, Liam Lawson generally capitalises on them. In 2023 at the Dutch Grand Prix, Yuki Tsunoda was involved off the track in the late wet chaos that was the Dutch Grand Prix, and a 5-second penalty meant that Lawson finished in 13th in his first F1 race. Then, in the next race in Italy, he finished in 11th, and in Singapore, he managed to knock out Max Verstappen, who was in the world's fastest car, which was an unbelievable achievement for someone who was only in their third Grand Prix weekend and finished in 9th in that race, aided by Fernando Alonso getting a penalty, Perez getting a penalty, and Russell crushing out on the last lap. But it was still a decent result in what was the car that was in last in the Constructors' Championship at that point. Of course, you've got to look at Liam Lawson's Japan performance, where he actually beat Tsunoda after an amazing battle. In 2024, though, he immediately got into the points at the Japanese Grand Prix, and of course had that amazing tussle with Perez in Mexico. Liam Lawson is very, very fast, and I have to say, maybe slightly faster than Yuki Tsunoda. However, there's a couple of things that stand in Liam Lawson's way, and I have to say, as a driver, he was involved in a couple of incidents with two respected drivers in two different weekends. Of course, he had that battle against Alonso in the USA Grand Prix and Perez in Mexico. However, in both of them, Liam Lawson seems to potentially be the one who causes it. Perez was extremely angry with Liam Lawson's aggressiveness, and Liam Lawson did the middle finger to Sergio Perez after getting past. That is extremely aggressive for Liam Lawson, who potentially comes across as slightly arrogant towards Fernando Alonso and Sergio Perez. He extremely annoyed Fernando Alonso in the US Grand Prix and did the same to Perez in Mexico. Liam Lawson maybe needs to tone down his drive ever so slightly because he's got the speed there and it's evidence that he can be mates with Max Verstappen. Other contenders, though, include Franco Colapinto. Williams have been capable of doing a deal with Red Bull for some time now, and Franco Colapinto's excellent performances this year have definitely helped his cause. Franco Colapinto has scored more points than Logan Sargent and Nicholas Latifi combined in the last 3 years. It is a very impressive performance by Franco Colapinto, who also beat Albon in Singapore, and should definitely be an RB or Red Bull next year, and is surprisingly without a seat next year. Just like Isack Hadjar. Isack Hadjar's done really well in Formula 2 and was the championship leader. He has definitely performed absolutely perfectly all season long, and yet next year he's heading for a Red Bull reserve driver role basically, and definitely also deserves to be in that Red Bull group. So that it is then. Sergio Perez is in Red Bull, and as it stands, he could be axed after the Brazilian Grand Prix, and if so, Liam Lawson would go to Red Bull, and Tsunoda would be teammates with potentially Isack Hadjar. And maybe next year, Franco Colapinto would be able to perform well enough to potentially get into the RB seat. But this is my opinion, and let me know your opinion in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time.